File designation, Subterra 12 Omega. Status, still active. The document begins with a single sentence that was never meant to leave the room. It reads, 12 cities, 12 confirmations. None of them belong to the timeline currently taught. The dossier was assembled across 4 decades by an interagency cataloging office that no longer officially exists. Its purpose was narrow. Locate, measure, and quarantine prehistoric material discovered beneath active urban infrastructure. 12 entries were closed. All 12 remain sealed. What follows is a paraphrased reconstruction of those entries. Names of sites are real. Coordinates are real. The interpretations are not the ones the public received. One detail before the first entry. The dossier defined prehistoric by a single criterion. The material must predate at its lowest stratum, the earliest written record of human activity at that location. By that criterion, every one of the 12 entries qualifies. Several of them qualify by margins measured in millennia. One of them qualifies by a margin that the cataloging office, in its own internal language, describes as no longer expressible in centuries. Entry number 1. The subtemple stratum beneath Mexico City, 14.2 meters down. Classification header. Archaeological anomaly. Structural override. Civil Works File 1978 MX-04. The field report was filed on the morning of February 21, 1978, by an electrical contractor named Candido Hernandez Polero, who had been laying cable for the Mexico City Light and Power Company under Pino Suarez Street, 2 blocks south of his Oak Hollow. His shovel struck a stone at a depth of 14.2 meters. The stone was carved. It should not have been there. The carving was Mexica. The carving was not the discovery. The discovery was what lay beneath it. Between 1978 and 1982, ground-penetrating radar surveys identified at least 7 subchambers extending laterally beneath the Metropolitan Cathedral. 2 of them were never excavated. The radar returns indicated voids consistent with worked stone galleries running at least 38 meters west of the known temple footprint. The galleries sat at a depth substantially below the Mexica Foundation course. The lithic samples retrieved from the upper margin of the lower stratum did not match any tool tradition associated with the Valley of Mexico's documented cultures. Pollen analysis conducted on sediment cores extracted in 1981 returned a stratigraphic age, at the depth of the unexcavated galleries, of approximately 9,400 years before the Common Era. That date precedes the entire Mesoamerican archaeological sequence. It precedes the domestication of maize. It precedes any structural tradition currently cataloged for the region by approximately 6,000 years. The galleries were never opened. Civil engineering objections were filed. The cathedral, weighing approximately 127,000 metric tons, was already sinking into the lakebed at a rate of 9 centimeters per year. To dig beneath it was to risk collapse. The entry was sealed in 1983 under a civil protection classification. The lateral galleries have not been reopened. The cathedral continues to sink. The next entry concerns a layer that should have been ice. Entry number 2. The pre-Roman substrate beneath London Bridge Station. Classification header. Urban excavation, layered burial. Civil Works File 1865, LDN 11. In the autumn of 1865, navvies cutting the foundations for the Southeastern Railway's London Bridge terminus reached a depth of 7.6 meters below the Borough High Street pavement. At that depth, the geology should have been undisturbed Thames floodplain alluvium. Instead, the workmen drove their picks into a wall of dressed Kentish ragstone. The wall was Roman. The Roman wall was not the entry. The Roman wall was the marker that told the cataloging office where to look. Beneath the Roman foundation course, at a depth of 9.1 meters, the navvy struck a layer of charred timber piles driven vertically into the clay. The piles were oak. They were sharpened with bronze tools. Radiocarbon dating, performed retroactively on archive samples in 1974, returned a calibrated range of 1480 to 1290 before the Common Era. That places construction in the late Bronze Age, 14 centuries older than the Romans who later built on top of it. The piles were load-bearing. They implied a structure, possibly a causeway, crossing the Thames at a point modern hydrology insists was open tidal water in that period. The structure has never been mapped. Beneath the oak piles at a depth of 11.3 meters, the navvy struck something else. The notation in Charles Roach Smith's logbook records it in 5 words. Beneath the oak, something older. The stratum was a layer of firecracked flint, mixed with the partial skeletal remains of an aurochs, an extinct wild ox, and worked antler tools of a Mesolithic morphology. The antler returned a radiocarbon date, recalibrated in 1983, of approximately 7,800 before the Common Era. That date is 6,000 years older than the bronze cut piles above it. It places sustained human activity at the crossing point of the Thames at a period when, by every standard model, the river itself had only recently emerged from the post-glacial reconfiguration of its bed. The site was not, according to consensus, supposed to have been inhabitable. The entry was redacted in 3 places. The redactions cover the names of 2 surveyors who attempted to reopen the cutting in 1923, and the depth notation of the 3rd stratum, recorded only as below the antler sterile but not undisturbed. The piles begin at 9.1. The Mesolithic layer begins at 11.3. The railway abutment was reinforced in 1998. The reinforcement extended to a depth of 8 meters. Everything below remains where it was placed. Entry number 3. The Hypogeum network beneath Naples. Classification header. Subterranean cartography. Multi-period overlay. Civil Works File 1969, NAP 07. The city of Naples sits on approximately 700,000 cubic meters of cataloged underground void. The catalog portion is the smaller share. The total volume is estimated conservatively at over 2 million cubic meters. The official history begins with the Greek colonists of Neapolis, who in the 5th century before the Common Era began quarrying the soft yellow tuff from beneath their own streets to build the city above. The Romans expanded the network into an aqueduct system. The Bourbons used it for grain storage. The Allied bombing campaigns of 1940 to 1943 drove civilians into it. The municipal authority opened a small section to tourists in 1969. What the tourist route does not include is the lower tier. In November 1969, a survey team led by the speleologist Clementi Esposito mapped a chamber at a depth of 40 meters beneath Via dei Tribunali. The chamber was domed, its walls bore tool marks inconsistent with iron implements. The marks were broader, shallower, and consistent with worked bronze or hardened copper. The chamber predated the Greek quarrying by an unknown margin. Esposito's report identified at least 4 additional chambers at similar depths, distributed across an area of approximately 3.4 square kilometers. They were not connected by the Greek or Roman tunnels. They were connected by passages that had been deliberately backfilled and then forgotten before the Greek arrival. The backfill contained charcoal. The charcoal returned a date of approximately 8,200 years before the Common Era. That date places the original excavation in the Mesolithic period, several millennia before the Gaudo culture, several millennia before any structural tradition currently cataloged for the Italian peninsula. The chambers were domed. They were 40 meters below ground level. They were cut into volcanic tuff with implements that have not been recovered by a population that has not been named. The chambers remain sealed. The municipal authority cites structural risk. Esposito died in 2017. His full survey was never published. The municipal authority of Naples has not issued an excavation permit for the deepest tier since 2004. Entry number 4. The mound beneath Edinburgh's Royal Mile. Classification header. Glacial anomaly anthropogenic substrate. Civil Works File 1933, EDI 02. In the summer of 1933, engineers from Edinburgh Corporation were investigating subsidence beneath the cobbles of the High Street, approximately 180 meters downhill from the castle esplanade. The subsidence was attributed to a collapsed 17th century cellar. The collapsed cellar was real. It was also the upper of 7 distinct buried levels. The 7th, recorded in a depth note by the engineer Robert Hardy at 11.4 meters below pavement grade, was not architectural. It was a layer of compacted ash, bone, and worked flint, approximately 60 centimeters thick, sealed between 2 strata of glacial till. The flint was knapped in the Mesolithic style. 2 of the bone fragments were human. The radiocarbon work, performed in 1962 on archive samples, returned a calibrated range of 8,240 to 7,910 before the Common Era. That date is not the problem. The problem is the position. The layer sits beneath glacial till that geologists had previously dated to the final retreat of the Devention ice sheet, roughly 11,500 years before the Common Era. The till should have been older than the flint. It was not. It was younger, by approximately 3 millennia. The implication was that the till layer above the occupation had been deposited by a process other than the retreating ice sheet. A localized reglaciation, a catastrophic sediment slide, or flood event sufficient to bury an active human site under several meters of compacted glacial material. None of the 3 has a confirmed mechanism in the regional record. There is a second anomaly in Hardy's report, less often cited. The human bone fragments showed cut marks. The cut marks were consistent with the use of a blade no more than 2 millimeters thick. Mesolithic flint blades of that thinness are not unknown. What is unusual is the wear pattern. The wear pattern, examined under microscopy in 1968, indicated repeated use against a hardened material. The hardened material left a residue. The residue was iron oxide. Iron oxide on a Mesolithic blade is not, in itself, evidence of metallurgy. It is evidence of contact. The nature of the contact has not been reconstructed. Hardy's report was filed. The cellar was repaired. The cobbles were relayed. The cobbles were last relayed in 2017. The relaying did not extend below pavement grade. What is missing from the record is Hardy himself. He resigned from the corporation in 1934 and emigrated to Canada. His personal field notebooks, mentioned in a 1971 review by the archaeologist Stuart Piggott, have never been located. Entry number 5. The basalt pavement beneath Mexico City's Tlatelolco district. Classification header. Secondary overlay. Parallel anomaly. Civil Works File 1985, MX09. 2 entries from the same metropolis are unusual. The dossier permits it because the 2 sites are stratigraphically distinct and were sealed under separate classifications. On the morning of September 19, 1985, an earthquake measuring 8.0 on the moment magnitude scale struck Mexico City. The death toll exceeded 5,000. In the Tlatelolco district, the Nuevo Leon apartment complex collapsed catastrophically. The recovery operation required the removal of approximately 38,000 cubic meters of debris from a single city block. Beneath the debris, at a depth of 6.8 meters, the recovery crews encountered a pavement. The pavement was not modern. It was not colonial. It was not Mexica. It was a flagged surface of basalt slabs, each measuring approximately 1.2 by 0.9 meters, laid in a herringbone pattern over a subbase of crushed pumice. The pattern matched no known pre-Columbian construction. The basalt source was traced, through trace element analysis, conducted in 1987, to a quarry near the Pico de Orizaba, 220 kilometers to the east. The transport of basalt across that distance, in the volumes implied by the surviving pavement, would have required a logistical capacity not previously attributed to any culture of the Valley of Mexico. The pavement extended, according to ground-penetrating radar, across an area of approximately 1.8 hectares. The dating is where the entry becomes prehistoric. Organic material trapped between basalt slabs and the underlying pumice subbase return a calibrated radiocarbon date of approximately 6,700 before the Common Era. That places the pavement 4,000 years before the earliest agriculture in the Valley of Mexico. It places it 5,000 years before any settled architecture currently cataloged for region. It places it, in plain terms, in a period when the Valley of Mexico was, by every standard model, occupied only by mobile hunter-gatherer groups. Mobile hunter-gatherer groups do not transport basalt 220 kilometers. They do not lay herringbone pavements across 1.8 hectares. They do not source crushed pumice from a separate quarry for subbase preparation. The pavement existed. It still exists. It has not been re-examined. The radar survey was conducted under emergency authorization during the rubble clearance. Once the apartment complex was rebuilt, the survey was not repeated. The pavement is still there, beneath the foundations of the replacement housing. The housing was certified for seismic resistance in 2019. The certification did not include the substrate. Entry number 6. The foundations beneath Jericho's modern town of Arija. Classification header. Deep stratigraphy. Pre-ceramic anomaly. Civil Works File 1957 JR-01. The modern town of Arija in the Jordan Valley at 31 degrees 52 minutes north and 35 degrees 27 minutes east sits 258 meters below sea level. It is one of the lowest permanently inhabited settlements on the planet. Beneath its streets lies the archaeological mound of Tel Es Sultan, excavated in the 1950s by the British archaeologist Dame Kathleen Kenyon. Kenyon's published findings are well known. She identified a fortified settlement with a stone wall 3.6 meters high and a circular tower 8.5 meters in diameter, dated to approximately 9,400 before the Common Era. The settlement predated the invention of pottery. It predated agriculture in its developed form. It predated, according to the consensus of 1957, anything that could meaningfully be called a city. What is less well known is the layer Kenyon recorded beneath the tower. At a depth of approximately 4 meters below the tower's foundation course, her team uncovered a sequence of plaster floors, each laid over the one before, totaling at least 21 distinct surfaces. The lowermost floor returned a radiocarbon date, recalibrated in 1989, of approximately 11,090 before the Common Era. That date places organized, sedentary, plastic construction at Jericho more than 13,000 years before the present. It places it before the end of the Younger Dryas climatic event. It places it in a period when, by every standard model, human populations in the Levant were still mobile foragers. The lowermost floor was not the bottom. Kenyan section drawings show a further unexcavated stratum below it, marked only as sterile clay, undated, possibly culturally inactive. The clay was sampled in a single column extracted in 1958 and stored in the British Museum reserves. The sample was re-examined in 2009. It contained microscopic carboni seeds. The seeds were domesticated barley. Domesticated barley in 1958 was assumed to have emerged approximately 3,000 years after the date of Kenyan's lowermost floor. The sample, if accurately attributed to the underlying clay, places domestication at Jericho before the floors above it were laid. Kenyan died in 1978. The site is now within a politically restricted zone. Excavation permits for the deepest strata have been suspended since 1994. The permit suspension has been renewed annually. The most recent renewal is current. The deepest floor of Jericho remains, in the most literal sense, still buried. Entry number 7. The stone quay beneath Alexandria's eastern harbor. Classification header. Marine substrate. Pre-dynastic anomaly. Civil Works File 1996. ALX 03. Alexandria, Egypt. Sits at 31 degrees 12 minutes north and 29 degrees 55 minutes east. The modern city was founded, according to the canonical account, by Alexander III of Macedon in 331 before the Common Era. In 1996, the underwater archaeologist Frank Gaudio began a systematic survey of the submerged portions of the ancient city. The submerged Ptolemaic and Roman strata were extensive. They were not the deepest material recovered. Gaudio's team mapped a series of dressed limestone blocks at a depth of 8.4 meters below modern sea level. The blocks were cut to an average dimension of 2.1 by 1.4 by 0.9 meters. The mortar between them was a hydraulic lime composition. That much was published. What was not published was a dating of marine concretion sealed against the lowest course of the blocks. The concretion, a calcareous deposit accumulated by sessile marine organisms, can be dated by uranium series methods. A sample extracted in 2003 by a French team returned a calibrated age of approximately 9,200 before the Common Era. That date is unaccommodated. It places dressed limestone construction at the Alexandrian shoreline more than 7,000 years before the Egyptian Old Kingdom. It places it more than 9,000 years before the founding of the city above. It places it in a period when, according to the standard reconstruction, the local sea level was approximately 30 meters lower than at present. The quay, if it was a quay, would have stood on dry land. The shoreline it served does not exist on any modern bathymetric chart. The blocks were aligned to a coastline that has been submerged for the entirety of recorded history. The implication is unambiguous. A stone-cut maritime facility was constructed at Alexandria more than 11,000 years ago by a population unaccounted for in the regional sequence, on a shore that has since vanished beneath the Mediterranean. The entry was sealed under a bilateral cultural property agreement. The blocks are still on the seabed. The bilateral agreement governing the site was last reviewed in 2022. The review concluded that no new excavation would be authorized. Entry number 8. The hypostyle beneath modern Istanbul. Classification header. Subterranean architecture. Pre-Neolithic. Civil Works File 2008. IST 12. The city of Istanbul at 41 degrees 0 minutes north and 28 degrees 58 minutes east contains beneath its surface a documented Byzantine cistern network of over 150 separate reservoirs. The largest, the Basilica cistern, was constructed under the Emperor Justinian I in 532 of the Common Era. Its 336 marble columns are well photographed. 2 of them rest on inverted Medusa heads. The orientation of the heads has never been satisfactorily explained. In 2008, during preparatory excavations of the Marmari Rail tunnel beneath the Bosphorus, engineering crews working in the Yenikapi district struck a chamber at a depth of 16.2 meters below modern grade. The chamber was hypostyle. It contained columns. The columns were not marble. They were monolithic granite, rough-dressed, approximately 4.8 meters tall, arranged in a grid of 6 by 9. The granite was sourced by petrographic analysis conducted at Istanbul Technical University in 2010 to a quarry near Aswan Egypt, approximately 1,900 kilometers to the south. The transport of 54 granite monoliths from Aswan to the shores of the Bosphorus in any pre-modern period would have required a maritime logistics capacity that does not exist in the historical record before the Roman imperial period at the earliest. The chamber was not Roman. It sat beneath a stratum of Neolithic occupation dated to approximately 6,400 before the Common Era. The Neolithic layer was undisturbed. The hypostyle was older. The columns rested on a floor of black basalt slabs at a depth of 18.7 meters. The slabs were polished. The polish was molecular. It was inspected under electron microscopy in 2012, and the surface roughness was measured at less than 80 nanometers. That figure is comparable to modern optical-grade finishes. No pre-industrial technology accounts for it. No subsequent technology has accessed the chamber. The Marmari tunnel was rerouted. The hypostyle was sealed beneath a reinforced concrete plug 3.2 meters thick. The plug was inspected by the contracting authority in 2018. The inspection report is not publicly available. What is missing from the record is the orientation of the column grid. It does not align with magnetic north. It does not align with the true north. It aligns with a North Pole position consistent with the Earth's magnetic field, as it is reconstructed to have been approximately 41,000 years ago during the Lost Jam geomagnetic excursion. If the alignment is intentional, the chamber was laid out during the Lost Jam event. That event predates the consensus emergence of architecture by approximately 30,000 years. The chamber would, by that interpretation, be the oldest constructed interior space on Earth. The interpretation has not been published. The chamber has not been re-entered. The plug remains in place. Entry number 9. The submerged quarters beneath modern Cadiz. Classification header. Title exposure. Periodic visibility. Civil Works File 1973. CAD 05. The Spanish city of Cadiz, at 36 degrees 32 minutes north and 6 degrees 18 minutes west, occupies a narrow peninsula in the Gulf of Cadiz. It claims, with some justification, to be the oldest continuously inhabited city in Western Europe. In the autumn of 1973, an unusual combination of low atmospheric pressure and equinoctial tide exposed a portion of the seabed approximately 400 meters offshore of the modern city's western beach. The exposure lasted, by the harbor master's log, 73 minutes. In those 73 minutes, a local fisherman named Antonio Quintero rowed his dinghy across the exposed flat and photographed what he described in his subsequent report as a street of houses paved with thresholds. He took 17 photographs. 11 survived. The published photographs show what appears to be a grid of low stone walls, paved alleys, and rectangular foundations extending across an area of approximately 2 hectares. The construction style matches no documented period of Phoenician, Tartessian, or Roman Cadiz. What does not appear in the published version is a depth note appended by the Regional Archaeological Authority. The submerged surface lies at a depth of approximately 9 meters below mean sea level. Sea level in the Gulf of Cadiz reached its present position approximately 4,000 years before the Common Era. Before that date, the depth at which the structures sit would have been above the waterline. The implication is that the structures were built before the sea reached its modern level. The minimum date for their construction, derived from the local sea level curve, is approximately 6,000 before the Common Era. The maximum date, derived from the lower bound of the regional Mesolithic, is approximately 9,500 before the Common Era. That window places construction in a period when, according to consensus, the Iberian Peninsula was occupied by small foraging groups using microlithic toolkits. The construction is not microlithic. It is rectilinear, paved, and laid out on a grid. The seabed has not been re-exposed since 1973. The next predicted window passed in 2020. The exposure did not recur. The reason is unexplained. The next predicted window is approximately 2067. Entry number 10. The cave network beneath modern Plovdiv. Classification header. Continuous occupation. Depth anomaly. Civil Works File. 2002 PLO 04. The Bulgarian city of Plovdiv, at 42 degrees 8 minutes north and 24 degrees 44 minutes east, is built on a cluster of 7 syenite hills in the upper Thracian plain. Its earliest confirmed surface occupation on Nevet Tepe is dated to approximately 6,000 before the Common Era. In 2002, during the laying of new fiber optic infrastructure beneath the Kapana district, contractors broke through into a void at a depth of 9.3 meters. The void was a cave. The cave was not natural. Its walls bore tool marks. Its floor was paved. The pavement was unusual. It consisted of interlocking polygonal slabs of fitted syenite, each cut to a tolerance of less than 2 millimeters at the joints, with no visible mortar. The technique is comparable to the polygonal masonry of certain Andean sites, including Cusco and Sacsayhuaman. It has no documented analog in the European Neolithic, Chalcolithic, or Bronze Age. The cave system extended, according to a 2003 ground-penetrating radar survey by a team from Sofia University, across an area of approximately 1.2 square kilometers beneath the modern city center. It connected, through narrowed passages, to the lower chambers of all 7 hills. Charcoal recovered from a hearth in the deepest chamber returned a calibrated radiocarbon date of 9,820 to 9,640 before the Common Era. That date is approximately 3,600 years older than the earliest surface occupation of Plovdiv. It places the cave network in the pre-pottery Neolithic A, contemporary with the lowest plaster floors of Jericho recorded in Entry 06. The polygonal masonry is not consistent with the toolkit attributed to pre-pottery Neolithic A populations in the Balkans. The toolkit, as currently reconstructed, includes microliths, bone awls, and ground stone axes. It does not include the equipment necessary to cut syenite, an igneous rock with a Mohs hardness of approximately 6.5, into polygonal blocks fitted to millimetric tolerance. A second sample, recovered from beneath the hearth at a deeper stratum, returned a date of approximately 12,400 before the Common Era. That date is older than every other entry in the dossier with 2 exceptions. It places human activity in the cave network at a point near the close of the last glacial maximum, when the Upper Thracian plain was, according to the standard reconstruction, a periglacial steppe inhabited only by late Upper Paleolithic foragers. Late Upper Paleolithic foragers did not cut syenite. They did not lay polygonal pavements. They did not maintain hearths in 1.2 square kilometer subterranean networks beneath what is now a modern city center. The entry was sealed. The contractors were paid an additional fee, the purpose of which was not specified in the municipal accounts. The fiber optic cable was rerouted. The cave is still there. Entry number 11. The megalithic substrate beneath modern Baalbek. Classification header. Cyclopean masonry. Pre-Bronze Age foundation. Civil Works File 1898 BL 01. The Lebanese town of Baalbek, at 34 degrees 0 minutes north and 36 degrees 12 minutes east, hosts the ruins of the largest Roman temple complex ever constructed, the Temple of Jupiter Heliopolitanus, dedicated in 60 of the Common Era, occupies a platform measuring approximately 90 by 50 meters. The platform is older than the temple. 3 of the platform's foundation stones, known collectively as the trilithon, are individually the largest work stones in the ancient world. Each measures approximately 19 meters in length, 4 meters in height, and 3.5 meters in depth. Each weighs approximately 800 metric tons. The Roman engineers who built the Temple of Jupiter did not place the trilithon. The trilithon was already there. The bedding of the Roman courses, surveyed in 1898 by Otto Puckstein, shows clear evidence of weathering on the upper surface of the trilithon prior to the Roman construction. The 1898 weathering estimate was a minimum, a re-examination of the upper surfaces, conducted by a Lebanese-German team in 2014 using laser scanning at submillimetric resolution, produced a revised estimate. The new estimate, based on the depth and pattern of microfissure development in the local limestone, indicated a minimum exposure period of approximately 11,000 years. That figure places a trilithon, conservatively, no later than approximately 9,000 before the Common Era. It is contemporary with Göbekli Tepe. It is contemporary with the lowest plaster floors of Jericho. It is contemporary, in fact, with several of the other entries in this dossier. A 5th stone, identified in 1990 and confirmed in 2014, weighs approximately 1,650 metric tons. It remains in the quarry. It has never been moved. No Bronze Age civilization in the Eastern Mediterranean is attested to have possessed the engineering capacity to quarry, transport, and elevate stones of that mass. No pre-Bronze Age civilization is attested to have possessed any architectural capacity at all. The Romans, who possess the largest known cranes of antiquity, are estimated to have been capable of lifting blocks of no more than approximately 100 metric tons. The trilithon exceeds that limit by a factor of 8. The 5th stone exceeds it by a factor of 16. The substrate beneath the trilithon has been partially surveyed. Ground-penetrating radar conducted by a Polish team in 2012 identified at least 2 additional courses of Cyclopean masonry below the visible trilithon, at depths of 4.2 and 7.8 meters beneath the platform's exposed face. The lower course has not been excavated. The classification cited is structural risk. What is missing from the record is the original purpose of the platform. The dossier marks this entry with notation that does not appear elsewhere. The notation reads, "Function not reconstructible from surviving evidence." The site has been on the UNESCO World Heritage List since 1984. The listing prohibits excavation below the existing exposed surfaces. Entry number 12. The subfoundation beneath modern Sanliurfa. Classification header. Pre-agricultural urbanism. Foundational anomaly. Civil Works File 2019 URF 08. The Turkish city of Sanliurfa, at 37 degrees 9 minutes north and 38 degrees 47 minutes east, sits on the northern margin of the Mesopotamian plain, approximately 13 kilometers north of the archaeological site of Göbekli Tepe. Göbekli Tepe, excavated from 1995 onward under the direction of the German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt, is currently dated to approximately 9,600 before the Common Era. It is the oldest known monumental architecture on Earth. Its T-shaped limestone pillars, some weighing up to 10 metric tons, predate agriculture, pottery, metallurgy, and the wheel. Göbekli Tepe is famous. The substrate beneath Sanliurfa itself is not. In 2019, during construction of an underground car park beneath the Balıklıgöl district, contractors at a depth of 6.7 meters uncovered a buried courtyard containing 11 limestone pillars of the same T-shaped morphology as those at Göbekli Tepe. The pillars were in situ. They had not been moved. The courtyard was older than the modern city by an order of magnitude. The pillars were photographed, measured, and reburied. The car park was completed on schedule. The Sanliurfa Archaeology Museum issued a brief statement acknowledging the find and indicating that further investigation would occur in due course. Further investigation has not occurred. What is missing from the record is the extent of the buried complex. Satellite-based ground-penetrating analysis, conducted by a team from the University of Edinburgh in 2021, identified anomalies consistent with at least 47 additional pillars distributed across an area of approximately 14 hectares beneath the modern city. The complex, if confirmed, would be the largest single monument of the pre-pottery Neolithic A period anywhere on the planet. It would be twice the size of Göbekli Tepe. There is one further detail in the dossier that did not appear in the museum statement. The carvings on the 11 recovered pillars were photographed in detail before reburial. They depict animals. Among the animals are species that should not appear together. A lion, native to the Anatolian highlands at the date in question. A bull, also native. And a third figure, dorsally finned, with a body shape that paleontologists consulted in 2020 identified, tentatively, as consistent with a freshwater cetacean. No freshwater cetacean is known to have inhabited the rivers of the Mesopotamian plain at any point in the Holocene. If the carving is accurate, it depicts an animal that the carvers should not have seen. The pillar carrying that image is now beneath approximately 2 meters of reinforced concrete. It is currently a car park. The car park has been operational since 2019. It is currently full. 12 cities, 12 confirmations. Each one extends a human timeline backward by an interval that ranges from several centuries to several millennia. Each one has been sealed beneath an active urban substrate, behind a classification that cites structural risk, cultural agreement, or administrative discretion. The classifications are not lies. They are also not the complete reason. The complete reason is that the cumulative weight of the 12 entries, taken together, would require revision of the chronological framework currently taught. Such a revision is not, in the assessment of the cataloging office, administratively feasible. The result is the present arrangement. The material remains in situ. The classifications remain in force. The cities above the cities continue to be built, paved, taxed, and inhabited by populations who do not know what is beneath their feet. Cities are built where cities were built before. The deepest layer is rarely the first layer. The first layer is the layer that is no longer there, because the second layer was built on top of it, and the third on top of the second, and so on, until the surface on which the present generation walks is the topmost crust of an accumulation whose lower strata are, in the most precise sense, inaccessible. Inaccessible does not mean absent. It means present and unreachable. Beneath cathedrals, beneath stations, beneath apartment blocks, beneath harbors, beneath car parks, beneath populations who do not have the equipment, the permits, or the political will to excavate downward to the foundations of their own habitations. 12 cities, 12 confirmations. None of them belong to the timeline currently taught. The dossier closes here. What remains in the file beyond entry 12 is incomplete. It has not been verified. It has not been transcribed in full. It concerns a measurement, not a place. The measurement is a depth. The depth is 47 meters. That entry waits for another night.